and welcome to our pillowcase project. Today we're going to be working on the magic pillowcase. There's a couple different ways you can do it, and we are doing the magic style, which means it's going to enclose all of our seam allowances, which is really cool. So it's just a little bit different way to do it, and I just absolutely love it. So I want to just kind of quickly go over what is in your kit. And depending on which fabric you have, you may have this one or you may have something different. You're going to have a piece of material that is 3/4 of a yard, and this is to make a standard size pillowcase. You're going to have another piece which is 3 to 4 inches wide. I've actually ironed this, so you're going to have another little skinnier piece. That's going to be one of the bands, little decorative bands, and then the edge of the pillowcase is going to be the fabric that is a 1/4 inch, 1/4 of a yard. So what we are going to do is first we are going to, your fabric is folded. So you have this little fold line right here. And these edges, if you're new to sewing, this is called the selvage. So it may be printed down the side. That's the selvage edge. So we're going to open this up so that we are working. So these are the edges of the pillowcase, and then this is going to be the top and the bottom. So the first thing you're going to want to do is get your skinnier piece of material, and you want to take this over to the iron and just fold it in half so that the edges meet. Just so we're going to fold this, iron it, and just fold that right in half, okay? And we're going to lay that and line it up with our selvage. And what we're going to do next is we are going to we're going to sandwich our next piece. But I think I just failed to mention something. So you are going to iron this. I know on the solid piece here, it's hard to tell the right or wrong side, but you're going to press wrong sides together on this band, on the skinny piece, so that the pretty sides are on the outside. Next, when we go to sandwich the top band, you're going to want to put the right side, which is the darker, prettier side. As you can see, it's a little bit lighter on the back, to the right side, which is my printed side of my floral here. And we're going to sandwich that face down. And we're going to pin all 3 pieces of material together and sew them together. And if it's easier for you to pin the skinny band and then come back and pin the other piece, you're more than welcome to do that. I like to save time and try to do it all together at one step. So it's whatever is easiest for you to do. So I'm just lining up my 2 bands here with the edge, getting that all sandwiched together. Pin that. And we're going to pin all the way across the top. Now you may have the little clips. You can use your clips as well instead of pins. Just whatever you like to use, but just something to hold your material together. Okay, now on this particular one, I do want to show you, as you can see, my navy is a little bit shorter. We're not really going to worry about that because it'll all get tucked in the end. So now we're going to take this over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew right down this edge. You can use the edge of your presser foot if you want to have a 5/8 or 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm just going to use the edge of my presser foot as my guide. I'm going to take a few stitches and then I'm going to use the reverse button to kind of lock in my stitches. You always want to do that when you're sewing so it doesn't come apart. And then we're going to sew all the way across. taking my pins out as I get to them so I'm not sewing over them. It's always a good idea to take them out and then so you don't knock the timing off. And then I did a quick little back stitch as I got to the other end to lock in those stitches. So now this is what your fabric should look like, and this is sewn in here. So you can see what we have. I'm going to slide this out of the way for just a second. And now we are going to fold this the other way. I rolled this the wrong way. 1 second. Make sure I'm doing this correctly. Okay, so I'm folding up the pillowcase main fabric here. I'm just gonna kind of fold it in quarters. So as you can see, I've rolled this up, and now I've got the right side, and I'm going to kind of make a burrito. And we're just going to continue to roll this so it's skinny. And we are going to wrap this so that the band, your 1/4 fabric, comes up here and meets this seam. And we're going to create a tube like this. Okay? Now I'm going to do that one more time. Okay, so you have your fabric like this, and we're going to lay it out on the table. You want to bring up the bottom, the main fabric, and if you want to kind of fold it up to the band and then fold it up again like this, okay, and then another little roll. We're just kind of getting it in a skinny roll, okay, and I'm going to keep rolling this. So now I've got my seam on top, and so now I'm going to take this raw edge of my band and match the seam allowance that we sewed. Okay, so that should all be on top. Nice neat tube like this. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and pin this. So all this fabric is rolled up in this little tube. Okay, so this is what you should have. Okay, and you can see that it's pinned and everything is rolled up inside there. So the only thing, you're sewing this raw edge of the band to the seam allowance we just sewed. So now we're going to take this over to the sewing machine. And we're going to stitch just like we did before. And if you want to follow your previous stitch line, just be right on the inside of it so it doesn't show. Make sure you do a little back stitch as you get started sewing. Put my glasses on. Again, as you get to your pins, take your pin out. Okay, so it's now all sewed together. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pull this inner fabric, and we're going to do this, pull it out, and turn this right side out. So I'm kind of pulling the main fabric out and turning this tube kind of at the same time. And ta-da! So now, if you will look, all your seams are encased. You cannot see where you sewed because it's now encased inside. So now we want to do that same thing, where we can enclose our seams down the side. So if you want to take this to the iron and give it a quick press, you can press this. But what we're going to do is we're going to put wrong sides together. Now you can see where that is a little bit shorter. So I'm going to go ahead and trim that, or you can sew, turn this so I can trim mine. Actually, I might use my rotary cutter. Hopefully my rotary cutter is good and sharp. Grab my quilting ruler here. So I'm going to go ahead and trim this off. If you don't want to trim it off now, that's no problem. I'm just going to, you can use a rotary cutter or scissors, or you can just sew it. I'm just going to go ahead and trim it up. And I don't have my longer ruler, but that's okay. Okay, so I'm just going to trim that up a little bit. So now what we're going to do is we are going to line up. You want to pin this because we want to make sure that this band lines up perfectly. And I'm going to pin right on the seam, and then I'm going to pin the band, the navy part, because I don't want it to flip up while we're stitching. Okay. So just put a couple pins like that. And then I'm going to just put, 2 pins down the side just to hold it. Then we will go straight across the bottom. Just put maybe 2 pins. So I'm going to stitch this, probably just use the edge of my presser foot, and then I'm going to use like a little, I'm going to trim it up so it's maybe 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, because I just want it to be really skinny. So let's go ahead and we're going to sew from the top down, and then you want to put your needle down in your machine and then rotate it and then sew across the bottom of the pillowcase. Put your presser foot down, take a couple of stitches, back stitch, make sure you back stitch there. when I get to the bottom, I'm going to put my needle down in the material, raise my presser foot, and now I can swing this. And as you see, the fabric's not coming out, but I can swing it around. Put the presser foot back down, and now we can sew straight across the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim that seam allowance just a little bit. So you can use your scissors, you can use your rotary cutter. I might just use my scissors. And you want it just to be kind of like 1/8 of an inch, just pretty close to the stitch line. We're just kind of reducing some of the bulk because we're going to turn this and do another little stitch so that we can hide our seams. And this is a perfect project if you don't have a serger. This encloses everything. You don't have to worry about any fraying or anything like that. That thicker part of that band might be a little, gotta have a nice sharp rotary cutter to get through that. Okay, so essentially this is what your pillowcase looks like, but we're gonna turn it inside out again because we want to sew and get this raw edge seam allowance inside. And we're gonna just do a little fancy stitching here. And what I'm doing is I'm using my finger. You can just poke out those corners real good. And then I'm running my hand down the seam. I'm gonna lay this down. And if you wanna press this again, you know, you want that seam to be pushed out because we're gonna just sew. We just wanna encase that raw edge. That's all we're doing. So it might be easier if you just run the iron over that. And then you can kind of feel the raw edge in there. So again, if it helps you, so I'm pushing this out with my fingers and I'm getting that seam nice and tight folded. And then I'm going to take some pins. I'm going to pin, and outside I can feel the fabric on the inside, and I want to make sure that I sew far enough out that that is enclosed. So you can see those pins. So I can feel that excess in there. You might be able to see how thick it is. So where my pin is right below that, and that's where I'm going to stitch, okay? So I'm just going to smooth out the edge here. Just push it out. And then I'm just going to put a couple of pins. It's just a little, it'll be a guide so you sew deep enough. It's not going to be super deep because you just trimmed it. And then push out your corner and then do the same across the bottom. And we're going to just do that same stitching we just did. We're going to go down the side and across the bottom. And I'm just pulling out the seam and getting it nice and flat. Okay, so I've got the little pins. I can feel the excess in there. And now I'm going to stitch down the sides. Again, as you get started, you want to, take a few stitches and back stitch and lock that in. as you stitch, just, you know, you can feel that seam allowance in there. Just make sure you're stitching deep enough that that's going to be hidden and you're enclosing that in your seam. This is actually called a French seam. This is used a lot for sheer fabrics to enclose so that they don't fray. Because if you serge a sheer fabric, you're going to see it. So now as I get down to the bottom, again, I'm going to put my needle down, raise my presser foot. Now I can swing the fabric without it coming out of my machine. And then we're going to stitch right across the bottom. And as I get to my edge, back stitch and then stitch off your fabric. Clip your threads. Okay, so I want to show you, so that's what this looks like right now. And as you turn it, your seam should match and none of those raw edges should be sticking out from the outside. And now we're going to flip it. I'm just going to use my fingers to push out the corner. If you need a little extra help, you can use your scissors, but don't poke too hard. You don't want to poke out the corner. And then you want to give it a good press. Take it over to the iron and press it. And you now have a beautiful pillowcase that all of your seams are enclosed. There is no raw edges anywhere to be seen. So you've enclosed them all. So you've learned how to do a French seam and how to make a beautiful pillowcase. Now, if you want to do any kind of personalizing, if you're giving it as a gift, you know, you can always, we do a lot of monogramming. I have an embroidery shop, obviously. But you can personalize right on this band. A lot of people have embroidery machines or silhouette or Cricut, and you can heat press on there. So it's a great gift. And then you can just fold it up. So if you wanted to do a complete set for somebody, you could. I made these for my kids for just about every holiday. So they are really fun. I also did a lot of donations, like I mentioned before, to the hospital, but fold it up and you have a beautiful little pillowcase ready to give as a gift. They're also great for birthday gifts, especially if you're having a sleepover with a friend or something, you know, then give them a pillowcase and they're ready for the sleepover. So I hope you have enjoyed making this. I hope you make lots of more. We're gonna have more kits for these, but they're just really fun. It's a great beginner project and you don't have to worry about any of those raw edges fraying in the wash. So thanks for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you either in the store if you're local, or you can follow me on YouTube or on TikTok for more sewing tips and videos. Have a good one.